And right now, very pleased to have with us on the program Archbishop Counsel Nedd the second from Project 21. Archbishop, how are you, sir?
I'm doing well. Thanks so much for having me on.
Absolutely. I appreciate you joining us on the program. It was almost a year ago, it was after the attacks in Sutherland Springs, Texas. You wrote a piece for the Daily Caller noting not only do you serve a parish in central Pennsylvania, you are also a constable. And you wrote about how those two sides never really mixed, right? You never really carried in church before, but the events in Sutherland Springs, Texas, had prompted you to reconsider. So let me ask you, over the past year, since you wrote that piece for the Daily Caller, what changed for you?
Well, so after the shootings, when I wrote that piece, I guess it was almost a year ago, went through this sort of debate trying to decide what I was going to do about this. And so I started carrying a small weapon in an ankle holster. After what happened recently, and because of sort of a little false alarm that got my hackles up at church, I just made the decision. I carry my full-size duty weapon with me at church on Sundays now.
And I'm curious. I mean, you are a rector at St. Alma's Anglican Church in Pennsylvania. Was this something that that you could do? You had the freedom to do. I know that some denominations have been more vocal than others about rigid policies regarding firearms in churches. But was this something that you were just able to do on your own?
Well, it's something I was able to do on my own. Being the bishop and the rector of the parish, I can take some liberties and make some decisions on my own. But the fact is, our church is in rural Pennsylvania. We have a lot of people who carry weapons in church on a regular basis. And as the shepherd of the flock, I have an obligation to provide for the welfare of the sheep and protect the sheep from the wolves. Historically, I guess that had been done with the bishop carrying a crozier, a big staff with a hook on the end. But, we live in a world now where there are lots of evil people. We've got lots of evil and unchurched people who are out to do harm to those they view as soft targets. And St. Albans Anglican Church in Pennsylvania is not one of those soft targets.
And I imagine, Archbishop, that this is a conversation that you have had with other clergy members over the past year, because certainly church security, whether the decision to arm yourself or to have armed security, or to harden up the sanctuary in other ways, this is, I imagine, a conversation that's taking place in a lot of houses of worship across this nation.
Well, yeah, exactly. But the fact is, most of the mega churches, the large churches around this country, and mosque and synagogues around this country, they have armed security. They have off-duty law enforcement. They are sometimes on-duty law enforcement. They have metal detectors and a variety of things, a litany of things to protect people, to make sure that they can come to church and worship in peace. That's cost prohibitive for probably more than 90% of churches across this country. So then what are you to do? Because you don't have the financial means or the numbers to support it. You can't hire people to protect you. Then what are you to do? Just be left at the whims of whatever evildoers happen to be walking around in the streets or attempt to walk in and invade your worship service? I would make a strong argument that churches need to protect themselves. They need to know how to respond in an active shooter situation.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, we're in Farmville, Virginia, which is almost directly due south of you by probably 6 hours or so. And, it's a very rural area as well. And I know that there are churches in the area who have church security teams that are comprised of parishioners. As you say, they don't have the resources to hire armed security staff to pay for that staff or to pay for off-duty officers. There are a lot of rural churches, sprinkled around the countryside here. They may have 50, 60 people on a Sunday. These are not huge churches. They don't have those resources. They're also, on any given Sunday, maybe 20, 30 minutes away from any police response if, God forbid, something awful happens. And so these are conversations that we do have to have. And I'm curious, so you talk about you having the freedom to make this decision on your own within your parish. Have you had these types of conversations with your parishioners? I know that some of them are already carrying and we're already carrying, but is this something that is openly discussed in your church?
Well, as I mentioned, my church, Penn State University, is about 5 miles from us, but we're in the outskirts of town. And we're in rural Pennsylvania. We're literally right smack in the middle of Pennsylvania. And our church probably talks about guns more than most churches. So we have all sorts of conversations about, you name it. It could be hunting or self-defense. So yes, it's a conversation that we have regularly.
Again, we're talking with Archbishop Counsel Nedd II from Project 21 on Twitter at Bishop Nedd. There'll be 2 Ds and online at counselnedd.com. Obviously, your entire state, the entire nation, I think right now is grieving over the murders of these 11 individuals in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, at the hands of such an evil individual. Is this something that you're that you are growing more concerned about? That this type of violence can strike anywhere. I mean, I saw a statistic yesterday that I think it was going back to 1990. We've seen almost 2,000 attacks on churches. Whether it is a clergy member attacked there or attacks during the service, attempted arsons. This is actually that number was surprisingly large for me, Archbishop. I didn't think that number would be as high as it was. So is this a growing concern for those who are showing up and are in the pews on Sunday?
Well, I think everyone should be concerned. But the fact is that, church attendance has declined over my lifetime, period. So the result of that is that you've got a society probably more full than ever of unchurched people. And so you've got a bunch of people, most well-intentioned, trying to figure out their way through life and make their way through life. But then you have some people who, for whatever reason, didn't grow up with the idea that, I need to be a good person. And you got a bunch of notorious evildoers out there who are out to do harm to people in general. But then, you got another subset of that. For whatever reason, they decided that the church is their enemy. And they need to do whatever they need to do. But, what I say is that the people of faith, we who are left, who still go to church, people who are church, need to spend time and actually pray for the souls of these people who are out there doing this evil. We need to pray that God softens their hearts and bring them to Christ. And that's what we need to do. That's our obligation. But again, by the same token, there are these people out there who intend to do harm. And, churches have an obligation to be prepared. Pastors have an obligation to provide for the security and well-being, not just the spiritual, but the social well-being or the physical well-being of their parishioners. And so you need to do things. Whatever you need to do it. There's tons of groups out there that will provide free active shooter training to organizations. So if you've got people in your church and you want to do a course, there are people out there that will go and teach those classes for free.
Absolutely. Archbishop, listen, I cannot thank you enough for coming on the program, and I hope we get a chance to talk again at some point in the near future.
I hope so, too. Thanks again.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your time. Archbishop Counsel Nedd II, again on Twitter at Bishop Nedd, online at counselnedd.com.